German metal bands Unprocessed and AVRALIZE are on tour right now across the UK, and I was lucky enough to go to the Bristol gig at the Exchange a couple nights ago to see them both perform live. And it was incredibly jaunty for both bands for a couple of different reasons, which I'll get into here in my review of their live sets and that evening as a whole. If you find yourself enjoying this sort of thing, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you can see more of these in future, as there's a few other great gigs coming up that I will definitely be reviewing. But now, let's focus on these two bands. So I headed to Bristol, which is a couple of hours outside of London, in order to see this gig. And in particular, I was excited to see AVRALIZE. Of the two bands, that's the one that I've enjoyed the most on record. But Unprocessed really surprised me on the evening. Now, AVRALIZE are a very new, fresh band this year. They've come out with their very first debut album called Freaks earlier in 2024, and I was so excited to see them live because I have listened to that album a ton. It is incredibly catchy, but heavy, impressive drumming, jaunty vocal stylings, incredible guitar work, but also just well-written songs. And I was hoping that they could capture some of that energy in a live performance at this concert. Now, it was at the Exchange in Bristol, as I said, which is a small venue, something like 250 capacity venue, and it was very hot and sweaty in there because of the packed out nature of the crowd in such a small space and the energy brought by the bands on stage as well. AVRALIZE's set was as hoped and expected, full of energy, fire, aggression in some of the scream vocals, but also some goofy jauntiness, right? It was a place to feel free, to be the freak that you are, and dance around and have a good time when you're singing along to some catchy moments or enjoying the piercing, gorgeous saxophone emanating out when they played Canvas. They played so many of the songs I hoped that they would, opening with Lotus, which is the first song I'd ever heard of theirs. So it was a wonderful thing to have that be an opener as my first time experiencing them. And this was their first ever live set in the UK, the first of many, I have no doubt. Despite their age and newness, they came onto the stage and exuded excellent confidence, willing the crowd to come closer and jump along and infuse the venue with some energy on their side as well. They were consistently calling upon that throughout the set, and not daunted by the fact that as an opening band in Bristol, there's a bit of a chilled city vibe. Not necessarily everyone's going to start bouncing from the get-go, but they absolutely managed to get people dancing increasingly as their set went on. I was particularly enthralled by the drumming of Bastian from AVRALIZE. He hits the drums with such incredible pace and power as well, which is a really rare thing. The faster you go, the harder it is to also put power behind it. But he's an absolute monster. A total force to be reckoned with on the drums. One of the most impressive and powerful live drummers I've seen in recent years. Bastian executed his drumming perfectly, but also has some wonderful improvised fills and bits and pieces here. Really delightful orchestration around the kit, uses cymbals really well in particular, and the double kick pedal pace was mighty. The bassist had an excellent amount of stage presence. He just exuded confidence and natural enjoyment of performing on stage on that instrument, and was playing some complex bass lines as well throughout. He was excellent. The guitar work of Philip on the other side of the stage from where I was generally watching was phenomenal. And what I really enjoyed is that there's some really complex, busy guitar work on some of the songs, and when those would come up live, I would zone in on him and be like, right, how's he going to do this? And because they're so complex, the poor man has to absolutely freeze and just concentrate on the finger because they're quite busy, but nailed everything. And some of the solos felt a little bit improvised as well, which is wonderful to see. But yeah, the complexity of the guitar work that he was able to put out just as one human being was really impressive. And then, of course, you have Severin, who is the vocalist, who has a sort of sweet shyness about him, despite the fact that he's got these intense scream vocals and a freedom with which he will jump around the stage and enjoy himself. But the earnest nature of which he is delivering the vocals for the AVRALIZE songs was a joy to watch, and you could feel the audience warming to him with every passing song that went on through that set list. Now, they've been on tour for quite a bit already. I think this was like their 16th date or something like that. So He was saying to me that his voice was not at full 100% level, but the scream vocals were absolutely full force. There was maybe 1 or 2 moments of the clean vocals that you need to do a little bit of pitch correction after starting on a particular note, but that's to be expected if you're asking this much of your voice on your first ever tour, 16 dates in, and it didn't take anything away from the performance for me. Like, actually, when it comes to live performance, I don't want anything to sound exactly perfect. You know, I like a bit of the rough and raw redness that sort of reminds you in small ways, this is live, this is happening right now with these human beings in this room, in this moment, and it will never happen again quite like this. Those, I think, are what really connect the live performance with the live audience there, which was awesome to experience then in Bristol. For a brand new band on their first ever tour, it was a phenomenal set, and they're bringing the jauntiness to metalcore in a way that I think more bands need to hopefully incorporate into their sort of style and the rest, right? They're really taking some risks, trying some new things, and the performance level is certainly there. The songwriting is there, and they're just going to get better in time. So it was really exciting to see AVRALIZE play their first ever gig in the UK on this tour. After them was the headliner of Unprocessed, because AVRALIZE were the only support that night on this tour. And Unprocessed are an incredibly impressive band from what I've heard thus far on their studio recordings, which is basically, I've heard the album and everything in between, and a few of the singles dotted around that and the recent ones. And I'm aware that Manuel Fernandez, the main vocalist and guitarist, has phenomenal vocal skills and also, in particular, guitar skills. So much so that he now has his own signature guitar series, which I was able to hold in my hands at the venue. They had one by the merch stand, which is a really fucking cool looking guitar. Quite lightweight, no headstock, looks amazing. But knowing he was going to be an incredible guitarist, I was excited to see how that's going to translate live. Sometimes that might depend on the mixing through the speakers of how much that you can hear. You know, if the drums are going to be too loud, then sometimes it's hard to hear all those details. But actually, the sound in this small venue was pretty impressive. And I wasn't even directly in front of the speakers. I was slightly off to the side, which is not the ideal place to stand for sound, but I wanted to get some good footage, and it was so busy like sardines and the rest of it. I had a nice little pocket by the side to enjoy it from. But his guitar work soared across the venue anytime he was playing that. So impressive to see what he's doing live in front of your very eyeballs. It's like when you watch a sport on TV, it's quite impressive. But when you're in a stadium watching the actual athletes do those physical feats, there's something connective about the human form in front of you doing it that just makes it all the more impressive. Watching the pace at which his fingers would fly across the fretboard, especially in the sweep picking moments, but also in songs like Sacrifice Me, where there's a tapping rhythm, the pace of that, it was like blurred in front of my eyes, with my actual eyes. It wasn't because of frame rate on TV. It was blurred because of the speed. Absolutely incredible. And often Manuel would start by doing the crazy riff, whatever it is, for say like 8 measures, and then hand it over to their other guitarist, who would then have to do it for the next like 16 bars, which was quite a thing to watch him do. You know, pick in mouth, concentrate, nail that for as long as he could. Perfect musicianship from all of them. The basses as well, playing slap bass, which I just love the sound of generally, was so impressive to see. He had plenty of good attitude as well, chatting to the crowd through the microphone throughout the set, getting everyone jostled up and ready for the next bits of music to come. But the drummer blew my fucking mind. The man is about 10 feet tall, and his snare drum is about 1 foot off the ground. It was a really interesting visual, and he just had so much power and speed, and just locked in and concentrated and executing everything. But it wasn't also just busyness and power for the sake of it. His grooves were so precise, his placements were so sparing of the either a bell and a ride cymbal or the kick drum placements and things. Just a joy to watch, which is really saying something, because even as a drummer, the guitar work and the performance vocally by Manuel is a really hard thing to take your eyes off. What a confident, calm, charismatic live performer that individual is. So there is obviously the high technical ability of guitar playing. The vocal pitch was amazing. He even said during his set that he's a bit sick from being on tour for so long. You couldn't tell. The vocals seemed unbelievably perfect. And the scream vocals as well had such ferocity to them. The songs came across incredibly well. The crowd were singing along to lead guitar parts, which was kind of cool to hear and be part of. And honestly, I've enjoyed their music for the most part. I think their songwriting is excellent. The guitar work is really impressive. But I kind of thought, unless you were really a guitar guy, you might not get as much out of that music without really paying attention to the impressiveness of the lead guitar stuff he was doing. But live, for me, it was a whole nother ballgame. I expected it to be impressive. I didn't expect it to be as meaty and ferocious and viscerally entertaining as it was in that room. The power that Unprocessed are able to create live was incredible. And the way that they interacted and engaged with the crowd throughout, was amazing. There were crowd surfers pretty consistently throughout the evening. This tiny little venue, which was kind of fun to have there. But yeah, the grooves that are decent on record, live, are ferocious. And just so many times during that set, I was looking at my brother and being like, holy fuck, this is incredible. And they went from a band that I've enjoyed on recording to one that I would happily go and see anytime they're in the UK. It was a really, really impressive, and it was also really jaunty in its own way as well. Like something about having these, very emotional and earnest metal songs performed in such a way that they are, but also throwing in the most insane sweep picking and tapping. That's a jaunty move to do, right? I went from an admirer of the band to a fan within the space of their set. Like, that was so incredible, genuinely. But also, the bands were a delight as well. Obviously, I've interviewed AVRALIZE on the channel before, so I know Severin and Bastian from that. You can go and check that out. I'll put a link somewhere here, so you can check that out if you haven't already. So it was wonderful to catch up with them and meet them in person and meeting the rest of the band and hanging out with them before and after their set. But also, Manuel was a very personal dude as well. I'd never chatted to him before, but we ended up spending something like an hour after the gig chatting to him and the folks in AVRALIZE about their music and the tour and the music scene in general and all the bits and pieces there and songwriting discussions. And it was so interesting and wonderful how welcoming and friendly every single person in all those bands were. And they spent the majority of the time, because myself and my brother were in the dressing room with them, speaking to us and to each other in English, even though they all speak in German much more fluently. Their English, by the way, is fluent anyway, but it was a very kind and generous thing for them to do, to compromise their main language in order to make sure that we felt welcomed and part of all the conversations in there. That's something I massively appreciated. And it looked like a very friendly and positive and calm and good-natured tour that those two bands are on. And also the tour manager was a delightful human being as well. Both of these bands are incredibly impressive, especially for the youth of AVRALIZE and how fresh they are as a new band, and the relative amount of time that Unprocessed have been together, but they are performing even beyond those years, I think, in technicality and also in just the captive nature of their live performances. They're all going to go on to do great things if they carry on in the trajectories that they're on currently. And it felt like a bit of a precious moment to be able to see them in such a small venue at this time, because onwards and upwards for these folks, I think, really. And while you can go and see them as soon as you can, to get a sense of this sort of intimate environment that they can perform in, because they won't be playing in these spaces forever. And wow, it was a wonderful thing to be a part of and witness live there in Bristol at the Exchange. So those are my immediate thoughts on that gig experience. If you're not familiar with those bands, I'll add a link in the description to a music video for each one that I think might be a good place for you to start. But other than that, do subscribe to the channel if you enjoy this kind of thing and you want to live vicariously through the experience that I get to check out here in the UK when bands come to play. I've got plenty of reviews coming up for amazing concerts coming soon. So hopefully I'll see you in one of those videos real soon.